And welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast and on the Auburn Undercover YouTube channel. My name is Nathan King. I'm joined today by Jason Caldwell in front of Auburn's football facility here. Of course, the Tigers are set to go on the road for their SEC opener against Texas A&M this weekend in College Station. Jason, on the contrary to our road trip to California where the weather was absolutely spectacular, it's supposed to be extremely hot in College Station. Still going to have that Texas heat over there, but we've been talking about it over the past couple of days as we'll get into the keys to this game. But it's so early in the year still, Jason. I know 3 games go by. The college football season always flies by, but one Power 5 game for each of these teams, for Auburn and Texas A&M. A win for Auburn over Cal, but they didn't look shaky offensively. A loss for A&M at Miami when they didn't look great on either side of the ball. This is really where SEC play starts. Every team, by the time Week 4 is over, is going to have played an SEC game. I think we're really going to start to learn a lot about Auburn, which we know a little bit, but I think this is the weekend where we're really going to start to get a lot more data on them and the rest of the SEC.
Yeah, I think it's probably fair to say had Auburn played like they did against Cal, had they been at Miami doing that, they'd have probably suffered the same fate as Texas A&M did in that game. And so 2 teams that are in similar spots a little bit. Texas A&M's kind of feels a little bit like Florida did last week with Tennessee coming in going, man, this is almost it's hard to say must win this early in the year, but it sure feels like it for Texas A&M the way things are going. Obviously, Hugh Freeze and this group is just kind of on the way up. For A&M, it's like make or break almost. Yep. And so I expect a team that's going to have a whole lot of motivation going in. And you're right, that the key for this Auburn team is what does it look like Saturday when those guys take the field? We just don't know, and we won't know till Saturday on a bunch of these guys and how well. We know Keontae Scott won't be there. I think Donovan Kaufman should be good. There's a lot of other guys that we won't know. This week they'll get a little work here or there, but we won't know really what it looks like until they take the field early Saturday morning.
Yeah, because A&M, like everyone else in the West, like you said, if you're looking at this year 1 Auburn team, as much improvement as they've made from last year, which I think they definitely have, if you're someone else in the West and you get that team coming to your home field, you're saying that's a game you have to win before you go play LSU, before you go play Ole Miss, before you play Alabama and everyone else who's on your schedule. Yeah, you're exactly right, Jason. Who makes the trip, who's on this travel roster, who is available is going to be big. The secondary health is going to be really big. It's a tough week to lose somebody like Keontae Scott. At the same time, it's the perfect week to get Nehemiah Pritchett back. Yeah. We've sort of thought, it's funny how much like he's kind of, not afterthought is the wrong word, but Kyan Lee has stepped in and done really well. But before the year, we were thinking, all right, DJ James, Nehemiah Pritchett, this could be one of the better corner duos in the SEC. This is the game where you need him back because this is an offense top 15 in the country in passing attempts. We know what Bobby Petrino's going to do. They're going to sling it around, and Connor Wegman is a really talented quarterback. That's one thing they haven't lacked here in the early part of the season.
Yeah, no, they really outstanding wide receiver group. When you look at getting an I. Smith back, you got Evan Stewart there. I mean, this is a talented group. They can stretch the field. Connor Wegman, strong arm, pretty athletic guy. He's made some runs against Auburn last year in that game, and so you look at it and you got to think. It almost feels like what I expect to go into Cal, where it may take a few more points to win. Now, what we're still trying to figure out is how much this clock is impacting things. Yeah. You think about, losing, 6 or 8 plays, and you start thinking about a lost possession here or there, and it impacts, these games that we might have thought were going to be in the 30s now might be upper 20s instead. And so I still think for this Auburn team, offense holds the key. I mean, defensively, obviously, you got to go out and make some plays, create turnovers, but for Auburn's offense, they got to build on what they did last week, got to throw the football, because if you're Texas A&M, you still have to come in with the first responsibility of, hey, we got to make them throw it and stop the run.
We don't want to date ourselves too much here as we're recording this here on Tuesday before we head to practice, but there are some other injuries that maybe are on the fence, maybe, questionable for this game. We'll see what ends up happening. I don't know how much we'll learn at practice.
No.
I don't know how much we'll learn from Freeze on the teleconference on Wednesday. So regardless of when you listen to this, a couple offensive linemen, Cam Stutz and Xavier Miller, they exited the Samford game. Doesn't seem like anything too severe there. Donovan Kaufman was held out of the Samford game, but similar to Pritchett here in the early season, you kind of felt like, I know you said a couple weeks ago, like if you're playing Georgia, then he's probably able to give it a go. Nehemiah Pritchett, it seems like this is the kind of game where he's going to be able to make a comeback here. Hugh Freeze talked about it on Monday. This is one of the most talent-rich programs in the country. That's part of the criticism, obviously, for Jimbo Fisher over the past couple years, is how they've performed with so much talent. These next 3 games, this 3-game stretch is about as recruiting heavy as you can get in terms of the talent. You're going A&M, you're going Georgia, you're going LSU. Those are some of your biggest competitors on the recruiting trail. those are some of your, some of the most successful teams in the country on the recruiting trail. So much of that is at the line of scrimmage, Jason. You look at this Texas A&M defensive line, so many five-star players there, lots of talent up front. This is still an Auburn offense that we feel like is getting better. We feel like is coming into its own in terms of the RPO system, but it's still going to take some time. It's only week 4. This is the game for me where we talked about the O-line all preseason, how much they improved, how good these transfer guys are, how experienced they are. This is a game where they've got to go show it.
And we may have to find out because, like you said, we won't know till Saturday, kind of what it looks like in terms of who all's ready to go, who's still a little limited. But, they've added some depth. They've added some key guys. But you're right, this Texas A&M defensive front, McKinley Jackson, a bunch of those guys. LT Overton's a kid from Georgia that we saw a couple years ago that's just kind of coming in now. They got a group of youngsters, a couple of older guys that really set the tone. And, they haven't given up a ton of rushing yards. They give up a lot of points to Miami. A lot of those were through the air, and that's why you look at this one going, well, Auburn's going to have to find a way to make some plays in the passing game. Can you protect enough? A&M's got some guys. They'll do some things on different. DJ Durkin will bring some pressures. And, I think it comes down to, can Auburn make the right reads? Can they make the right decisions? Because this is an offense that's designed to, all right, we're going to count who's in the box. If there's too many there, we're going to throw it. If there's not enough, we're going to run it. Do you make those right decisions all the time, and can you connect on one-on-one opportunities? You're going to have some really talented secondary too. Can you make some of those one-on-one plays for Auburn's offense?
Yeah, and look, over the past couple weeks, I think when you look at this offense in a vacuum, what they do from drive to drive, play to play, they've actually been pretty solid. Hugh Freeze talked about it at Cal, saying, look, we had a bunch of stuff working for us. We just kept shooting ourselves in the foot. Obviously, you had the 4 turnovers in that game. You had 2 turnovers last week, and in each of the last 2 games, Jason, they had a 4th down that they failed. And so we were looking at it before we came out here. They're top 15 in the country in points per play right now, meaning when they have the ball and when they hold on to it, they're actually doing a pretty decent job of getting up and down the field and scoring points. But, yeah, this is going to be the one where I know Peyton Thorne, some of these decisions were maybe a little bit off, but some of them maybe were less his fault. This is the one where that decision making that we heard about all preseason, it was the reason why he won the job. It seems to be getting better over the course of the early stage of the season. This is a week where he can't afford to go out there and make 3 or 4 bad decisions because A&M's got the talent, they've got the dudes, and they've got the offense. Frankly, they got the firepower. They're going to be able to make you pay for it. 1
or 2 of those might be an issue when you start talking about 1 or 2 issues in the passing game. You make 1 or 2 of those mistakes, and it creates a turnover. We saw last week, and Hugh Freeze said, look, the first one was on us. The play call, some of those things down the goal line. The second one, open receiver underneath, threw into double coverage, maybe triple coverage. Those are the things you won't get away with. They got away with it at Cal. They got away with it a couple of times against Stanford. You won't get away with those things, on Saturday at Texas A&M.
Yeah, they've definitely got it's a significant uptick in competition level from what Auburn's seen the first 3 games. But obviously that they've come to expect that. Hugh Freeze knows that. We talked to some of the players yesterday. They're understanding that it's not necessarily the preseason that we were just in, but at the same time, this is when things start to really feel real. And at the same time, Auburn's only one of 5 undefeated teams in the SEC, and so they haven't necessarily played as stiff of competition as some other teams in the league, but they do have that kind of in their back pocket heading into SEC play. Jason, I wanted to ask you, what did you make of the running game against Samford? That was some things that were continued to be brought up on Monday. We just talked about this offensive line. This is a rotation that they're still trying to figure out. Jeremiah Cobb is maybe starting to show, hey, he needs to be on the field a little bit more, but only 3.1 yards per carry for these running backs. I think this needs to be look, we've seen it when Auburn's won at A&M in the past. I think about Boobie Whitlow in 2019, them just kind of riding him as a bell cow through the game. They're going to need to rely on this running game. Like you said, they can't get in 3rd and longs in this game because that'll make it a lot harder on Peyton Thorne.
Yeah, and I think some of it too is that it comes down to those decision makings. Going, look, okay, if you're Auburn, at what point do you go, okay, no matter what, we're going to try to run the football? If A&M has 8 or 9 guys in the box at times, do you start going, okay, look, we're going to throw it as part of the running game? That's what we haven't seen as much of yet. We've seen the tight ends get a little bit more involved. We've seen Damari Austin get involved. We haven't seen the other running backs get involved in the passing game a whole lot. That can be an extension of the run game. I could see this game being a game where Auburn's running backs have 10, 12 catches, where you start to go, okay, look, if you're going to try to do that, here's how we're going to counter. We're going to get those guys on the perimeter, make you chase them, and get some separation there. So that could be part of the run game. But, yeah, sooner or later, it's 3rd and 1, got to learn to run the football. But I do think that they early on they're like, no, we're not going to do this. later in the game against Stanford, they said, look, we're going to get Robbie Ashford in the game. And I think in those situations, he's going to get in the game, run a true zone read, and I won't be shocked to see him throw a couple of balls because we saw him, and hey, he threw it pretty well Saturday. That could be an added dimension to this offense as well.
I think this is going to be one of the more clear pictures so far of what he's going to look like in this offense. We saw him, obviously do a bunch of great things in week 1. Week 2 was just out of sync. Freeze admitted they're just looking for a spark. They're rotating guys in. It got both the quarterbacks out of sync. He said, we don't want to do that anymore. And then against Samford, when they got down near the goal line, they actually went away from him because they're like, we want to work on some passing stuff. We want to work on some goal line passing. I think this game, sort of clean slate for both quarterbacks. You feel like both of them have done a pretty good job in their respective roles. You feel like maybe this is going to be, hey, this is what Robbie Ashford's role will look like. I've talked about it before. I think back to when they were A&M in 2019 and Joey Gatewood threw a touchdown. Everyone was sucked in and he had John Samuel Shanker wide open. Maybe something similar in this game. On the other line of scrimmage, Jason, Hugh Freeze talked about it on Monday. Auburn has not necessarily been pleased with how they've been able to bring pressure with just their main defensive line. We knew that might have been a concern. We talked to him yesterday, Jalen McLeod. The last time he was in this stadium, absolutely monster game when he played at App State. Obviously, they won that game last season. They're going to need him to be healthy, and they're going to need to continue Ron Roberts with these DBs, all these creative blitz packages. They're going to need to continue to do that because if Connor Wegman's the kind of quarterback, if they just let him sit back there, I mean, this is a good Auburn secondary, but he's going to pick him apart all day.
Yeah, you got to get pressure. You get him off his mark. You got to create some timing issues. That's going to be the key for this Auburn defense. And you're right, it's going to take a Donovan Kaufman. Eugene Asante, we didn't see him as aggressive last week. I think we see a Eugene Asante again that now gets downhill and gets after the quarterback, does some of those things. So to me, honestly, you look, Jalen McLeod is a huge key for this game. Jalen McLeod, Donovan Kaufman, Eugene Asante, to me, are the 3 keys for this Auburn defense. Those guys have been the pressure guys so far. Can you get Keldrick Faulk more involved? Maybe some of those guys too. Those have been the 3 pressure guys so far. Can they create pressure and get Connor Wegman off that mark a little bit? If you don't do that, then it could be a long day.
Yeah, for sure. Again, they're super high up in terms of passing attempts, so they're not going to have any issue throwing the ball around. And when they do run the ball, it's been pretty effective so far. Again, we just don't know that much yet, and we're going to figure out a lot about them and the rest of the SEC because, like Auburn, they've played a couple teams that are a lot lower level of competition. Jason, if Auburn comes away with a win, if we're sitting here around this time on Saturday and Auburn's got a win at Kyle Field in their SEC opener, I think it's about 7.5, 8 point spread, I think, in favor of A&M right now. What are a couple things that you think Auburn has to do well if they're going to come away with a victory?
Yeah, we talked about it the whole time. Win a turnover battle and mistakes. That's the first thing always going on the road, but for this team especially, it's vitally important that you do that. And for me, it's explosive plays. They got to create explosive plays. It's just too tough to expect to go 12, 13 plays in drives and score touchdowns. Got to have explosive plays. So for me, it's win a turnover battle, play clean football, and have a couple of explosive plays on offense. If you can have some of those passing game, a couple running game, to me, that holds the key for Auburn.
That was kind of a takeaway for me, Jason, on Saturday it was Samford, but I feel like the passing game playmakers are maybe starting to get a little clearer. Jay Fair, Shane Hooks, Rivaldo Fair. We've been wanting to see more out of him. Jeremiah Cobb split out as a receiver. We're starting to see, hey, here are the guys they're comfortable with. And so you mentioned getting those explosive plays. I think it comes down to some of those guys who are going to get them down the field.
I think that's the key. I think you got to try to create some chunk yardage plays. And this A&M defense, if you get them, if you allow them to sit you there and 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8 all night, it's gonna be hard sledding.
Yeah, and every team says, if we don't make mistakes, if we don't turn the ball over, we would play much better. Auburn, I think, truly is in a situation where if you look at Cal, we've talked about the scenarios before. If they chug along in the third quarter, they're actually probably in a pretty comfortable position in that game.
Probably win that game pretty easy.
Against Samford, I mean, I'm thinking they could 50, 60 points if they had not turned it over in opposing territory, 2 or 3 times if you consider the turnover on downs. And so this is an Auburn team that feels like if they just go out there and execute, they can really compete with anybody here in the early stages of the season, especially an A&M team that maybe has some shaky parts to it right now. And so we'll certainly see, Jason. This is a really intriguing SEC opener, I think, for both teams. We'll see 11 a.m. Central Time on ESPN. 3rd time in 4 games. Auburn's going to be on ESPN here in the early stage of the season. So we will see you guys there. We will be there in College Station at Kyle Field. And so until then, we will catch up with you guys, auburnundercover.com. For Jason Caldwell, I'm Nathan King. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to y'all soon.